guys, so I'm here today to share with you my TBR for the Femme Fantail Readathon. Now, if you haven't heard me droning on about this readathon recently, then you might not know that this is actually the one and only readathon that I run in conjunction with my friend Jill, who hosts things like Twitter sprints with me over on Twitter at the Book Nuke. I will link her down below, obviously, and it's something I really enjoy doing with Jill, who is one of my absolute best friends in the whole world. And we both love fantasy, and we both love discovering fantasy written by women, because I think for like a very long time fantasy was quite a male-dominated genre, and I like to make a conscious effort to read and discover new fantasy authors that are also women. So that's why we came about with this readathon, Femme Fantail, which is obviously a play on femme fatale, but with fan in it, because fantasy. Anyway, I did an announcement video the other month which told you that we would be hosting the second round of this readathon from the 18th to the 25th of August, and I am here now to let you know what books I will be picking from during those 8 days and hopefully reading a fair few of. As I go through each book, I will also let you know which of the bingo squares it ticks off, in case you're interested in doing the bingo chart that Jill and I made for this readathon. And do keep an eye out on Twitter in the run up to and during the readathon for announcements around reading sprints, because one of my favourite things about the last round of this readathon was participating in reading sprints with all of you, and like read-ins and sitting down and like chatting to all of you over Twitter and Instagram about the books that we were reading and discovering new fantasy books by female authors. It was so much fun, I loved it. Please do use the hashtag on Twitter and Instagram because I am constantly checking it. But without further ado, let's get into the books. I only have 3 physical books on my possible TBR because I'm going to be visiting Edinburgh that week, and I don't plan on carting loads of physical books up to Edinburgh with me, and we'll probably only take 2 of these. So one of them is going to get abandoned before the readathon's even begun, but at the moment I'm toying between all 3. The first one is Uprooted by Naomi Novik, a retelling of Beauty and the Beast heavily influenced by Polish folklore, and because of that I think this would work for the category which is a book set in a country not your own, although I think a lot of fantasy books are set in worlds that aren't really part of, you know, real geography. The fact that this is inspired by a country that I don't live in, although have close connections to, means that I would consider this fitting into that bingo square. I have just heard amazing things about this book. It's about a girl called Agnieszka that gets chosen as that year's sort of sacrifice to this local wizard who takes a new girl every so often to serve him in his castle, and it's about the relationship that they build together, Beauty and the Beast style. Very much excited for this. Oh, and of course this would also work for the retelling prompt. I then have 2 books which are both second books in duologies, the first books of which I read in the first round of the Femme Fantail, so I thought it would be about time that I read them, and also the perfect opportunity. The first one is Turning the Storm, which is a queer fantasy, so we'd tick that queer box nicely. And although our protagonist is coming to terms with her sexuality and the fact that she is interested in women and not men, it isn't purely a romance. It isn't so much focused on that romance element, although there is clearly a character that I believe is going to become more central in this sequel. And it's more about our protagonist becoming involved in essentially what is the revolution. She starts off this book at a music conservatory where she's training to be a musician. She has like an amazing talent with music, and she has managed to get a scholarship to this conservatory. However, this is a society with strict religious laws that have outlawed the old religion and very much imposed the new religion, and you have to be seen as participating in it. And she finds herself becoming caught up in that struggle during the course of the first book. But I'm so excited to see her come to her own in this sequel, because she was really developing into such a fantastic, strong character with a really pivotal part in the revolution, so I want to see what happens next. And then the other sequel I have in a duology is The Rose and the Dagger by Readathon. And like Turning the Storm, this would also work for the sequel prompt. It would also work for the multiple point of views prompt, because the first book in this duology had multiple point of views, which means I assume the sequel will as well. Not to confirm that, but I'm assuming, and it would work for the BAME author prompt. The first book in this duology was a mixture of fairy tales, particularly heavily influenced by 1001 Arabian Nights, but with elements of Bluebeard and Beauty and the Beast, which are all fairy tales that have overlap anyway. It's about a kingdom where the prince takes a new bride every night and then has her executed the next morning, and our protagonist Shazzy's best friend was one of these women, so she's decided to volunteer as the next bride with plans for revenge, and nobody has volunteered before. They've always been chosen unwillingly, so everyone's really shocked when she does this, and it instantly makes this young prince curious about her, and we learn that maybe all isn't as it seems. Obviously I can't say more than that about the sequel, except that we'll be continuing in that adventure. Unfortunately, I haven't heard as good things about the sequel, which is probably why I haven't picked it up yet, but I love the first book, so I do really want to know how things wrap up. But then because I'm travelling, I am going to be relying more on my Kindle and audiobooks on my phone, so let's move on to Kindle books that I may be reading. The first one is The Dark Wife, which would work for queer, retelling, adult and standalone, which I'm also now realising Uprooted would also work for. Most of these books can double, if not triple up on prompts, which is awesome. But The Dark Wife is a retelling of the myth of Hades and Persephone. So in Greek mythology, Hades was the god of the underworld, Persephone was the goddess of spring and the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest. She is kidnapped in all ancient versions of the myth. I know there's like more modern adaptations where she goes willingly, but in all ancient versions she is kidnapped by Hades and taken as his bride to the underworld. In this retelling, however, Hades is a woman, and I believe this is a more consensual queer retelling of that story between Hades and Persephone. So I'm really intrigued by it. I've been meaning to pick it up for ages. Also on my Kindle I have Bride of the Sea by Emma Hamm. This is another retelling. It's a retelling of The Little Mermaid. And it's kind of a sequel in that it is part of a companion series, so you could maybe describe it as a sequel. It's very much a standalone story, but it's, like I said, set in a series of fairy tale retellings that Emma Hamm has been writing, and it's in that world, even though you could, like I said, read it by itself. But other than that, it would also work for an adult book, but I essentially just love Emma Hamm's retellings in her Other Worlds series. I've read the first two books in the series, which are like a direct duology retelling Beauty and the Beast. Then there's Bride of the Sea, which I haven't read. Then there's two more books that work as a duology, which are a retelling of the Swan Princess, and I also love them, so I kind of need to backtrack and go back to Bride of the Sea since it kind of comes in between those four chronologically, and this seems like a perfect opportunity. But whilst we're on the topic of Emma Hamm, I also have one of her books on audiobook, and that is Seas of Crimson Silk. This one is actually the first in a new series by Emma Hamm that I haven't started yet, and it's about a woman called Sigrid who is a dragon shifter, which means she shifts between human and dragon form, and she's spent her entire life essentially in captivity, forced to serve her kingdom, although she's, you know, made her peace with that, until her kingdom trades her to a neighbouring kingdom that she doesn't want to go to. So suddenly she's in a position that she really doesn't want to be in, serving someone she really doesn't want to serve. But like all the other books by Emma Hamm I've read, this is going to be a combination of fantasy and romance, and I love her romance plot lines. I always really enjoy the development of the relationships between the two characters that she sets up in these romantic relationships. So I am sure I'm going to love this, and not to mention because of the fact that the main character is a dragon. In fact, I don't know why I've not read this one already, so I really should get on it. But also on audiobook, this time on the Scribd app, I have saved Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. I've recently read An Enchantment of Ravens by this author and really enjoyed it. It was just like a really fun, fast-paced fantasy romance, and this one has had even higher praise because I think Enchantment of Ravens was her debut, so by the sounds of it, this one's even better. You know, it shows a progression of her writing, which makes me all the more excited to read it. It's a YA standalone, so it would work for both of those prompts in the Readathon, and she has been raised as an archivist by one of the libraries in her magical world, where she's responsible for all of the magical objects that they store there, and one of those objects, evil grimoire, escapes its chains, I guess, and she has to prevent it from wreaking havoc, which is all I know and all I need to know. Also on script, I have a little bit of a controversial pick because I think it fits more into the sci-fi genre, but there is a prompt for this readathon, which is read a book under 150 pages, and I'm either going to read this or something else that I'll mention afterwards. This, however, is the only book I really have on my TBR at the moment that works because it's 108 pages, and that is The Citadel of Weeping Perils by Aliette de Bodard. This would also work for the BAME challenge, and like I said, it does seem more sci-fi from the blurb to me, although a few people have listed it on Goodreads as fantasy, so you know. But I read another one of Aliette de Bodard's sci-fi novellas earlier this year and really enjoyed it, so I would like to read more by this author. It's about an empire on the brink of war and an engineer on a space station who decides to travel back 30 years in time using her like engineering skills, I guess, to when the empire was at its height, presumably in connection with what's currently going on. That's all I really know, but like I said, I enjoyed this writer's writing and would be interested in reading more by them. The other book that would fill the under 150 pages prompt is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill, which I don't have a copy of, but you might have seen it in my recent video where I shared the books that were at the top of my wish list with you and asked for your votes on what I should pick up. Now, one of those was The Tea Dragon Society, so I may take this as an opportunity to pick it up whilst I'm in Edinburgh, because it's also a middle grade graphic novel, and one of the prompts for the readathon is to read a middle grade, and the only other one I haven't managed to fulfill. So it would work for both those prompts, and you know, it would just give me an excuse to pick up a graphic novel I've been wanting to read. But like I said, this is middle grade, so it's very cutesy, and it's about Greta, a blacksmith who discovers a lost tea dragon without a home, and she has to learn to take care of it. These tea dragons are kind of miniature dragons, and their care is really a dying art, so she's kind of learning this skill to look after this dragon and rediscover something that the world is losing. So I'm really intrigued by this. I read another graphic novel by Katie O'Neill and it was adorable. It was Aquacorn Cove, so I've no doubt I'll love this. There's also a sequel, so it seems like something I should get around to at some point. But those are the books I'll be picking from during the Femme Fantail readathon. Like I mentioned, this is an 8-day readathon. My friend Jill and I will be heavily interacting with everyone on social media throughout this readathon. We will be hosting reading sprints, as well as hopefully having like a whole day / evening overnight read-in where we just like spend our time reading together and communicating with all of you online, and we can all just sort of come together no matter where we are in the world. That's the beauty of social media. I would love to hear, however, what you plan on reading during this readathon if you're participating, and if you need any recommendations for books that fit into certain prompts, I'd be happy to provide, so do let me know down below. But until next time, happy reading, and I'll see you again soon. Bye guys!